Hello and welcome to this Edexcel A-Level Geography Enquiry Question Review. And this one is for Carbon Enquiry Question 3. How are the carbon and water cycles linked to the global climate system? As always, the first thing that we do is we look at the specification. This is very important because it tells us the key terms that you are likely to see within the exam paper and the key terms that you will be expected to see in your answers as well. And as always, we need to be very careful of looking for these world symbols, which tell us the compulsory case studies. You must know facts on these, and you will be expected to give specific facts relevant to the question in your assess and evaluate questions. Also in bold, we can see the synoptic themes of players, of futures, and of actions as well. Now, it's very important to remember that as we look at the exam questions, that the explain questions will tend to relate to just one of these detailed content sections within a key idea, whereas the assess and evaluate questions may link different key ideas and may be linking different sections of detailed content within them. So let's have a look at the final mind map. Now, as we come to the end of the course, we can start to see this is getting more and more complicated. And it's really important in geography is that we don't just see each individual topic and each individual inquiry question as standalone. Now is the time to reflect on everything that we've done throughout the A-level course and start to draw the links between them all. And it's going to be your understanding and application of this that is going to lead to you getting the best possible grades in the exam. It is by no means just good enough to be able to recall key facts, key case study bits, to use the correct key terms. It is about seeing how these are all intrinsically linked. Geography is a massive subject, and it's important again that we do focus on the specification. So we focus on just the key areas that the exam board want us to look at. It would be very easy for us to spend years and years and years just looking at all the different variables on just one of these different topics. So we've got to link it back to the specification to keep it relevant to the questions that are likely to come up. So we can see we've got a number of different factors, so let's have a look into them. First of all, we're looking at the impacts on the carbon and water cycles. We need to look at what are the human actions that are having an impact on them. And the main one is increased consumption. And why is this happening? Well, because of the increasing need of fuel, food and resources, because of increasing population and increasing development and increasing wealth levels. This is leading to things like the conversion of grassland and wetlands for agriculture, which is having an impact, or the farming practices are having an impact, reducing soil health. But there are ways around this. We could look at moving to more permaculture and crop rotation, which would help to increase soil health. Moving back to farming techniques from several hundred years ago, before the mass technology and pesticides and fertilizers, and actually using the ecosystems effectively to produce the crops that we need. We can also have negative impacts on deforestation, which we've already covered to some degree. This is going to change the nutrient cycle, which will have an impact on net primary productivity. It will have an impact on the food chain. It will also have impacts on the water cycle because it's going to change the flows and stores within the drainage basin. The impact on soil health and the fact that it will also have an impact on the supporting systems of the ecosystem and water cycle, which keeps everything working. And deforestation can also have an impact on climate, both on local, regional and global scales. Now, it could be said then that afforestation could be a solution, but not if afforestation relies on a monoculture where we just plant one species, because this is not going to reinstate ecosystems and could actually increase the CO2 produced from it. It is important that we promote indigenous species, that we take a long-term view so that afforestation can be seen as a form of carbon sequestration and carbon capture. And this afforestation links to the Oceanic curve. And it's our job as geographers to help those less developed countries to move further along that Oceanic curve more rapidly so that they can have the positive effects of afforestation to both the climate, the nutrient cycle, soil health, and to the drainage basin. There are also oceanic changes as well, which again we've already covered to some degree. Increasing ocean acidification because of the warmer oceans is leading to a high concentration of carbon. This is damaging the ecosystems such as coral reefs and mangroves. Again, this will break down the food chains, net primary productivity, which will have an impact in the amount of carbon released into the atmosphere. Climate change could also have an impact in thermohaline circulation, which in turn can drive or be driven by changes in climatic patterns, such as the El Nino Southern Oscillation, the North Atlantic Oscillation, and all of the other oscillations that occur with regards to the different oceans. It's also going to have an impact on climate change. With these changes in the climate or latitude bands will be shifting. This will have an impact on the ecosystems and will have an impact on their own regulating and supporting services, which will impact on climate change, which again we start to see all of these feedback mechanisms starting to come in. As we start to see less ice, the albedo effect, as we start to see melting permafrost and changes in wetlands and peatlands, we're seeing more CO2, methane into the atmosphere, leading to more warmer oceans, leading to climate change, which is going to lead to more storms, more release of CO2, and again, more feedback mechanisms, which are going to have greater impacts. And this massively links to the futures element. All of these linked feedback mechanisms are very important. The problem is we don't know the tipping points of these, and so this is why the futures are so uncertain. We know that it's going to happen, but we don't know to what degree, and we don't know to what event. So we can forecast these changes, but we cannot predict them. And this is where science or people who are against or don't believe in climate change as anthropogenic, they are saying, well, the science doesn't agree. It does agree that there will be changes. We just cannot agree on what those changes will be because of all of the different variables. So what are the impacts or the implications on human well-being? Well, again, there are many of these. When we look at the impact on the water cycle, the changes in the climate is going to change as in precipitation. The intensity, the amount, the timing of it is going to have a big impact on the availability of water for industry, for personal use, and for agriculture. The impact on the river regimes is also going to have an impact on the ecosystems as well. It could lead to the changes in cryosphere and permafrost is also going to have a big impact on water security. And this impact is going to be a disproportionate impact. It's going to be far worse on those with poor water supply, with existing scarcity or stress areas, and those with low levels of development. And it's these very countries which have contributed least to the climate change and these changing patterns. Also, there's going to be the implications on humans of ocean health. Oceans are important for billions of people, for the fish stocks. The change in thermohaline circulation is going to change climate. The ocean health provides regulating services such as coastal protection. So those living in low-lying coastal plains are going to become possible environmental refugees, which we talked about in the water, and we've also talked about with coast. There is also going to be tourism affected, a major industry for many of these developing nations. With forests, the services that the forests provide, if they die back, is going to be a major problem. They provide cultural services, the well-being for people, provisioning the goods, the medicines, the fuels, the building materials, the regulating, the way that they can regulate the climate, and the way that the ecosystems support themselves. And again, we bring in the Oceanic curve, the way that we need to make sure that people and low countries which are on this upward curve of environmental degradation reach this point of wanting to reduce it more rapidly. But this depends on geopolitics. It depends on being able to change the attitudes of governments, of TNCs, and of personal consumption models as well. Then we need to look at the responses. Now again, the responses are difficult because we don't know what all of the feedback mechanisms are going to be. We don't know how they're going to work. What we do know is that change is going to come. And what we're going to look at is, well, we could bury our head in the sand and say, well, we'll do nothing. But the outcome of that could be devastating for the planet. It may be that the Earth does start to recover and the natural systems kick back into the right way. In which case, if we do nothing, and that is the case, then that's okay. But what happens if we do nothing and these feedback mechanisms kick in and make the planet worse? Then that's going to lead to a major catastrophe, major issues. So we need to do something, and it's going to be hard. It's going to change consumer patterns, it's going to change governments, it's going to change taxation, the way that we do business. We also don't know, on top of these unknown tipping points and feedback mechanisms, we don't know what future population growth or growth of development is going to be in different countries, particularly with those countries which are low levels of development at the moment. What we do know, though, is that we need to look at both mitigation and adaptation. When we look at mitigation, this is trying to reduce or stop the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. We can do this through carbon taxes, making the polluters pay at source, which will lead to an increase in the cost of goods. We could look at more renewable energy. But again, we know there are pros and cons of that, particularly in terms of reliability and supply. But hopefully through technology and improved efficiency, this could be a solution. We can also look for mitigation at carbon capture schemes, whether that be carbon capture from the air using technological fixes or through schemes like afforestation, but avoiding the monoculture. But whatever happens, there seems to be a 50 to 60 year delay between changes in the carbon and changes in climate and ocean and water patterns. So we are still going to need some level of adaptation. Now the problem is with adaptation, it's far easier for those countries with high levels of development. But it is those poorer countries who are likely to see the greatest changes who are less able to adapt to it. So in terms of adaptation, we need to consider things like water conservation and management, again linking to things that we saw in water with Singapore. The ideas of geoengineering, what large-scale engineering will that involve? Things like the Three Gorges Dam or water transfer or energy transfer schemes. What are the technological fixes available? Could we use land use planning? Could we avoid building on those marginal lands which are at risk? But also it brings us to the complex questions around things like genetically modified crops. Well, these are seen as a saviour for many. They have many issues. And because you're genetically modifying, we don't always know what the outcomes will be, particularly if they crossbreed and cross-generate, and this can lead to lots more problems than the ones we're trying to solve as it is. We can start to see when we put this all together, it's a very complex and detailed system. There are so many different links, and in your exam questions, you wouldn't be expected to bring together all of those links. There are just far too many of them. What you would be expected to do in your assess and evaluate questions is draw together 3 or 4 of the key points, looking at the links, giving examples of them, and then being able to assess just how important they are. Remember, there is more than one correct answer. There are many correct answers. There can be wrong answers as well. But the key to assess and evaluate is how you justify your answer with evidence and making sure that you're using assessment and evaluative terminology, things like an important idea. This is vital. However, another important factor, or this could be influenced by. And it's this type of language, linking these different points together, that you will be awarded credit for. So, This was a very complex one. I hope it's made some sort of sense. Thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye.